Welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm Roger Humphrey. In this episode, we meet English teacher turned author John P. Wallman. Join us as we discuss his Dark Matter series of books. Here's a hint. It's a vampire's tale. You're really going to like this, I know. Before we do this, take a moment please and reach down there and hit the subscribe button. It's a little thing, but it really helps out the channel a lot. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. John Wallman, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's kind of get after this a little bit. You're an author. You've got books out. You got more coming out. So you've got your second book in the Dark Matter series coming out in February. This is coming up in a couple of weeks, right?
Well, I'm shooting for late February. It just depends on what comes back from my editor. It's in her hands right now, and she said she'll be finished with it by late January, early February, and then based on what comes back from that, I might be able to get it out by February, but definitely in March. That March will be the latest. So Q1.
Yeah,
coming out in Q1.
The best laid plans of mice and men, right?
That's right. That's right. Tell God your plans and hear him laugh, right?
Yeah, I've been taught that. Yes, indeed. So this is the second book in a series of 4. Am I remembering that correct?
Correctly, yeah.
And the first one's already out.
First one's already out. I happen to have a copy here.
Oh, get it closer to the camera. Let everybody see that puppy. There we go. Good enough. Thank you.
Yeah. And it came out in 22. We're planning, and that's when I had a publishing contract at that particular time, and we were planning on the following book to come out late in 23, which would be right around about now. But things happened, and we decided to part ways because of creative differences. And here I am now trying to learn how to do all this on my own. So it's been a journey.
Self-publishing is, I've talked to people and they like it and hate it all at the same time.
Right. Well, there's a lot, as an author, as a writer, you don't really understand the publishing side of everything.
Sure.
And what goes on behind the scenes. Ideally, I'd love just to be able to write and put my ideas down on paper, have people give me feedback, make changes, and additions, deletions, whatever. That's the fun part, I think. And then let someone else deal with all that, EPUB files and CMYK files for your book cover and all this technical stuff. And there's a lot more going on the publishing side that I think most new writers realize, especially if they're going to self-publish. And consequently, it's been, trying to work on the book and also work on all these publishing things. It's been tough, and it's caused me to push the book back, another month. But I finally got the book done. I'm getting ready to get my ISBNs for the 2 versions of the book. And
now explain what the ISBN for people who wouldn't know.
Oh, that International Standard Book Number is what that stands for, and it's basically a specific number assigned to a specific version of a book. And if I bring up my book here, all books have this little area here, and this number right here at the top, going all the way across the top.
Uh-huh.
That's the ISBN for this particular book, for the paperback. And then, of course, the ebook version has its own ISBN. And if I would get an audiobook, the audiobook would have its own ISBN, and so forth and so on. So, and they're not cheap. So, usually people will buy them in bulks of 10 because it's cheaper to buy them in groups of 10 or larger, 20. So I need to do that and need to get those ISBNs assigned to the versions of the book. And then once I do that and get the book cover finalized, I do have my own prototype, I guess you can call it, that I created on Canva. But I really need to have a good graphic designer to do it on a good piece of graphic design software and make it a CMYK version. CMYK, I can't remember what it's the 4 basic colors of printing. I forget what they stand for. Cyan, yellow, magenta, K for black, I think. It's important to have a very high quality book cover so that when it does print out, it prints out exactly in the colors that you want. Otherwise, things don't quite turn out exactly the way you want them. So
I know that in my field of music, that something that the musicians have had to deal with for several years now is this do-it-yourself stuff that we've had to do. The even sales and distribution, which is, and I'm like you, I'd rather make my art.
Right.
So it's
and I haven't even talked about marketing. Marketing's another beast in and of itself. So, there's more to becoming an author than just writing a book. And writing the book's daunting enough. I mean, I don't know how many people have said, I just can't believe you sat down for that many hours to write all those words in a particular way, telling a particular story. And yeah, that's not easy, but it's a lot of fun. Even going through the editing process, different drafts and different versions of the story, and you cut and add in, and all that's kind of fun for me because you're molding the story. You're in the story itself. All this other stuff on the outside, it's being a creative, doing the business side of things just isn't a lot of fun. And some people enjoy it and like doing that and getting on social media and making, posts and creating videos and doing all that stuff. And God bless them. But I'm not. I wish I had enough money to just hire a team to do all this stuff for me.
Yeah,
But hey.
I was talking to another guest, another guitarist, actually, a few months ago, and we both commented on the fact that like him, I've been in and out of music studios, recording studios since the late '60s, and up until recently, I've always had somebody else pushing the buttons, and now I've got to do it when I record. Mm-hmm. And it's this left brain, right brain, left.
Oh yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. And I just feel like my attention is just going, back and forth and sideways and all kittywampus at times. It's really a challenge for me to put all that together, and it is for a lot of musicians I know. I've talked to others the same way. So it's difficult. So I got to ask you also, when you're talking about doing the process, how different is your first draft from your final draft?
Well, you probably know that your first concept of a song, and you're putting those chords together and the melody together, and then you start writing the words, and the next thing you know it, that's changing the actual melody because you like the words, but then some of the melody changes the words, and and you're looking for rhyme and meter and beats per line and all that stuff. A lot of it, a lot of the same thing happens with writing a story and writing, especially with writing a novel. When I started this, and that's a whole story right there. Oh, gosh. I started the kernel of the story. I actually wrote back in the 90s when I was an English teacher in middle school. Um, I had my students create these very complex, and we're talking about seventh and eighth graders, very complex projects, which I called a thematic portfolio project. And so they could create, they had everything that went into these projects had to revolve around a theme. And they moaned and complained about all the work because I was a taskmaster and I made those bad boys and bad girls write a lot. And but I think deep down inside they really like doing these projects. But anyway, so what? Someone someday said, "Well, I'd like to see you do one, Mr. Wallman. You're making us do all this. I'd like to. You should do one too." So so and I said, what am I going to do? I'm going to say, well, no, because I'm a teacher. It's like, I was like, all right, I will. And just to show you guys that, it is possible to do all this and get all this done. So, and I said, and I'll let you all pick my theme. But I manipulated them a little bit. so, and I said, just don't have me do anything about vampires because I don't know a whole lot about vampires and I don't like that kind of stuff, but I really did. And so it's like, well, we want you to do a project on vampires. I said, okay, if that's what you want.
Hooked.
I very evil. So, so I part of the project was writing your own piece of prose and writing your own piece of poetry for the project. And so the story I wrote the beginning of a short story that dealt with a girl, a young girl, probably in high school, with a fetish for serial killers, but in her research and everything dealing with serial killers, she figures out this pattern and then comes to find out that she can actually hunt down this serial killer. Well, when she hunts down the serial killer, much to her surprise, the serial killer is actually a vampire. And he's old and decrepit and kind of like you get the feeling he's on his last days of existence because he's just had enough. And they sit down and have a little chat. And so I write all this out, and I'm sharing it with the students, and their jaws are dropping. And I incorporate some historical background about where this vampire came from, and dealing with the Middle Ages and the Crusades and all this kind of thing. And a lot of that actual kernel story will be in part one of this next book, The Dark Gambit. But when that was all said and done, and the next group of kids come in the next year, that story just kind of got filed away. And then years later, I was watching True Blood with a friend, and we got to talking about, we could write a vampire story. And I remember I actually started one a long time ago. And so I went downstairs and dug it out of 50 zillion boxes of all my old teaching material down there. But it was handwritten. So consequently, when I started typing it up, word processing it, it just took off. And the girl became older. The vampire became different. The girl had a boyfriend. Then the girl had a past relationship with someone that was going to have something to do with the current situation. And that's when, there in 2008 or 2009, when I started word processing that old story is when the Dark Matter series started coming about. And then I I figured out that there were actually two protagonists to the story, one for light and one for dark, and it just kept it was like a snowball going down a hill. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and more complex, and I had all these interludes and preludes and postludes of backstory on all these different characters. So that when I finally got the publishing deal, and I had 3 full books drafted and part of the 4th book finished, she was like, "These are way too long, John. We got to cut these down." And so what I ended up doing is some of the things that I cut out of those early drafts, I've turned into shorter pieces of fiction, and I put those on Kindle Vella, which is a serialized platform that you can cut up stories into chapters or pieces or episodes or whatever you want to call them. The audience gets to read the first 3 for free, and then they have to buy tokens to open up the subsequent chapters or episodes or whatever it is that you want to call them. And so The Long Shadow of Rising Night is on Kindle Vella, and that's kind of like a backstory of the dark protagonist's father and how he had an influence of what's happening in the current Dark Matter series. And then I just published another one called The Tales of the Dark Sun, which is about the backstory of the vampire that Angelique, the dark protagonist, talks to. Was in that very first Colonel story back in the 90s, but will be prevalent in the beginning of The Dark Gambit, which is book 2.
Wow. So these complement each other, not necessarily you got to read one to get the other, but it's more of a complementary thing.
Yeah, I basically put them out there for people who are interested in other aspects of the story that don't have to do with Angelique, who's the dark protagonist, and John Wilkins, who's the light protagonist. These were all backstory, and I had presented them as interludes and preludes and postludes at the beginning and peppered throughout the story, and then at the end of each of the main books. And I have to admit, taking them out did not detract from the story at all, and that's why readers will not find many of those in the actual text itself, in the actual 4 books. I'll be presenting those on Kindle Vella between each publication of each book. So I have another story planned between The Dark Gambit and The Dark Harvest, and then a 4th story planned between The Dark Harvest and The Dark Angel, which is the last book.
Wow. It kind of, I guess it kind of hits me almost like the whole Star Wars world, where you've got the basic story, but then you've got all these side stories out there.
Yeah. In a sense, it's like that. Yeah,
so,
it's a good way of putting it. So you have like the Han Solo movie that you don't really have to know what happens in that to understand what's happening in the Star Wars movies themselves, but they enrich that particular character, and that's right. What these Vela stories do is you meet Renaud the vampire at the beginning of the 2nd book, but there's a whole, he's 840 something years old. He has all kinds of backstory that I had written out about how he became a child of the night, how he was involved with some very nasty things in his past and how he got through those. And it's just basically to enrich that particular character. And that's what the 2 other stories that I have planned will also do, is enrich characters that are not the protagonists themselves, because the
Uh-huh.
four main books are about those two characters, but you have all these other uh, characters of light and darkness operating in the background and interacting with those two main characters. And consequently, I have a lot of material that I'm not even using in any of those stories. So that other material might appear somehow.
So it really
And I think,
gives you a chance to flesh out that universe.
yeah, oh, yeah. So and that's why it's basically called, it's called the Dark Matter series. Um, but you'll see, and at the beginning of the second book, I have now called it the Dark Matter series universe, because I've listed. You know how at the beginning of all the books you have a list of all the the text and all the books that are associated with that particular series. Well, I have everything all. The reader will get to see all of the books and stories that are associated with the Dark Matter series universe. So.
Now, do you lay all this out like an outline of some kind as you, or is it just kind of seat of the pants? Oh, I here's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing, that you have the outliners and the pantsers, as they're called. And yeah, and those are actual writer terms. So I what am I? I am primarily a pantser. Um, I didn't really focus on creating an outline for the story until I got the publishing contract, and the publisher wanted to see where this was going, because at that time she had only seen the first book and had seen part of the second book. And she's like, well, "Where's this going?" It's like, "Well, I can give you the third book." "Well, I don't. Just give me an outline. Just outline from this point to the end." So I ended up actually outlining the entire. So I went back and kind of created an outline for the first book, and already had the second book half fully complete. I mean, I had the whole draft of it done, but I had already started to do some revision on it. And then basically, I ended up fleshing out the entire series, and consequently, as I was doing that, I ended up tweaking some things that are actually going to happen in the second book. So, that's that. I think when you're talking about outlines, that's the thing about outlines that I think helps out a lot, is that if you're flying by the seat of your pants, and you don't really have, what would be a good metaphor, a flight plan. It's hard to know where you're going and what's the purpose of your particular flight, your trip. Even though I already kind of knew where everything was going, that last, I only had it into a third of the way into the fourth book drafted, but I knew where I was going. I just hadn't figured out all the details of how everything was going to get to that particular point. So in doing that outline, it helped me to actually figure out where those two main characters were going to end up, how they were going to end up there, and the final conflict between those two characters. So
I've written a couple of beginning method books for the guitar, and I found that I have to outline it before I write them. And I find also that outlining process is brutal. God, I hate it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it took me a while. I mean, I'm like, a lot of the time I could be actually composing right now, and here I am putting together this outline. But I think though it was an important exercise though for me, so to help me focus on what was important between those two characters. If the books are going to be about those two characters, what is important for those two characters when they interact and then separate and then interact again and then come together at the very end for the final conflict. Um, figuring that out and all the details leading to that helped me go back, not in the first book, because the first book is kind of almost like a prelude to what the rest of the series is about. Um, so, when I was figuring all that out, it helped me to refocus what was going to happen in books 2, 3, and 4. And consequently, I ended up changing a couple little things here and there because of timing issues, because you have two concurrent stories. And I had to make sure that it made sense of what was happening in December of 2009 was happening in the other timeline, and that those two timelines made sense. I couldn't say something was happening in December, and when you figure, because readers are like that, it's like, wait a minute, aren't we still in November? We're still in November here, and and so they'll figure that out. So
Have to reconcile everything. And
yeah, so it's when you have two plots that interact with each other, it poses some difficult timing issues, and so you have to. Sometimes I had to go back and add in something into the one timeline to help it catch up with the other. So so that the outlining helped me to get those two timelines aligned a lot better than what they were.
great. Um, so, if you're self-publishing now, are you also self-editing? Or are you getting some help in that department?
No, I was fortunate enough to have met or not met face to face, but back in COVID times, everyone met like this,
Sure.
virtually.
Yeah.
But I met and chatted with the editor who was in charge of finalizing the Dark Stirs, and when she finally sent that back, and I was looking through that final draft, I couldn't figure out what she had done. She's like, what did she do? This looks like the same exact thing I sent to her. And so I finally put her edited version next to the version that I sent her, and was just kind of thunderstruck about all the little micro changes. She didn't make any major um, linear or paragraph changes. There are all these little micro word changes, or inverted some sentences around, things like that. She took great pains in making sure that my voice didn't get changed at all, that it was really me. And that's why I couldn't recognize any changes at all, because it just, it looked the same to me. But when I put them side by side, it was amazing, all the little tiny things that she did. And I was thoroughly impressed with that. So when it came time to start thinking about the final edit for the Dark Gambit, I contacted her, and she said, "Sure, I'll be more than happy to work on your book for you." So, like I said, I just sent that to her last week, and she started working on it this week. So,
Oh, awesome, awesome. So,
I'll be very curious to see what she does with this, because, in the first book, there was me and the publisher, and we kept going back and forth, sending it back and forth. So there was a lot more polishing on the book before it went to her name's Cheyenne Sampson. She's the editor, and so this version, I went through it so many times. But as everyone knows, a writer is so close to his or her work that there's a lot of little things that you just don't catch. It's impossible. Your brain kind of fixes things as you're reading through it. And so I'll be very curious to see what happens with this edit. So there will probably be quite a few more larger changes in this version. But some, but Cheyenne is a very smart and very artistic young lady herself, and I have full confidence and faith what she'll do with the book. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she's going to do with it.
So, if somebody wants to buy the book, is it available on Amazon or through your website or?
Well, yeah, the website. The website. I haven't. When what I called the publishing divorce
Yeah.
occurred, I had all the links to all the book and some of the and the Long Shadow of Rising Night, because at that time that was the only other piece that was available. They were all linked through Courage Publishing, and consequently, I had to take all those out. So I haven't put any links to purchasing the books or links to the stories on the website yet. So I've neglected the website, and I feel ashamed admitting this. So, but I do need to work on that website and get everything cleaned up on that, because I spent a lot of time on that. And then when all this happened, with the publishing issue, I had to really focus on the Dark Gambit, the second book, and kind of let slide some other things that I was doing because I had the time to do it, and the website was one of them. So no, you can't hit any links on the website to go to purchase the book, but you can purchase it through Amazon. You can actually purchase it through any online bookstores at all, Barnes and Noble. Most of your indie bookstores, like your local bookstores, should have it listed. So, I would encourage you to go to your local bookstore website and purchase the book, because that, I'm all about small business and not too happy with the behemoth that is Amazon. So
Yeah, that is a beast that has gotten out of control, isn't it? So.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
John,
yeah, go to your local bookstore website and purchase it through there.
John, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really, really appreciate this. And hopefully people get out there and take a look for it. I will indeed put a link to folks to your website, so that when it does get polished up and brought up to snuff, then they can go and check it out. That'll be in the description down below. So folks, if you're listening or watching, please do that. But thank you, John, so much for being a part of this. I really, really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. I would enjoy coming back, but we got our things to do, right?
Yes, so we do. So
Places to go and people to see. So yeah, so thanks for having me on. Appreciate it, and you have a good one.
Thanks, John. I'd like to thank John for coming on the show. You'll find a link to his website in the description. And I want to thank you too for taking the time to listen. Please feel free to leave comments and suggestions. They would be most welcome. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon on Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.